Welcome to TXOGA Talks, where energy meets insight. The purpose of this podcast is to provide you with a candid conversation about our energy needs, our energy security, and your energy future. Texas oil and natural gas have made our nation the world's energy leader, constantly innovating and investing to fuel the economy, protect the environment, and power the world. This industry is fast-paced, high-tech, and essential to improving modern life. And we're here to talk about it. You're listening to TXOGA Talks, where energy meets insight. Welcome back to another edition of TXOGA Talks. I'm Todd Staples with the Texas Oil and Gas Association. Glad to host you again today. Our last segment was part one of the 89th legislative session that focused specifically on legislation that was necessary for the future success of oil and natural gas, which in turn is necessary for the success of Texas, because Texas and oil and gas is so intertwined, of meeting our energy needs in our state and for being trusted allies across the globe. In that segment, we had Cory Pomeroy, Vice President General Counsel of TXOGA, and Tulsi Oberbeck, Vice President of Government and Regulatory Affairs. And we're glad to have you both back with us today for part two of the 89th legislative session. Now, y'all did a great job last session. We talked about produced water. We talked about the liability of produced water and managing that to have a pro-business environment. We spent a lot of time on well plugging because that's a big issue for the public. It's a big issue for the industry. It's a big issue for landowners. And we are glad to see the progress that was made there. And thank you both for being with me then and coming back again so we can have part two today. There are other issues that were big on the table, and oilfield theft is one of those. You might have been reading in the paper about some recent arrests of people that are involved in the illegally stealing oil, stealing oilfield equipment. We read and heard about this last session. During the middle of session, some people pulled up to a terminal in the middle of the night and hooked up the wrong hose and blew it up. So it's life-threatening in many instances. But the legislature really focused on this. How many bills would you say were introduced and passed this session, Tulsi, dealing with oilfield theft?
There was 3 or 4 key bills that were introduced. I believe 3 of them passed, dealing with this issue, and kind of tackled it from various issues, from studying it to increasing penalties to having more organization on from DPS and local law enforcement. So trying to tackle the issue from all different directions.
Of course, some people may think, well, why was there such a focus on oilfield theft? I mean, if somebody's breaking the law, you've got local police departments, you have sheriffs. Why is it a little bit different in the oil and gas industry? Why this is a problem that's been a little bit hard to solve?
I think 2 things. The first one is West Texas is a big area.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of room to hide. Secondly, and probably operationally most important, is that the activities that are occurring look like maybe legitimate, operations. And so people masquerading as oil field workers, and it's hard for local law enforcement to discern the difference. The local law enforcement out in West Texas is doing a good job. They just have a lot of area to cover, and they don't have sometimes the type of equipment and technology that's needed to cover and identify folks and trace them and track them. And so I think, we talked about produced water last episode and how quick the legislature was to pass bills to really get a hold of it. I think this legislature looked at oilfield theft and said, we've had enough. And so they did. Tulsi, they passed 3 bills that quickly and without too much controversy to address this.
And another reason I think is why it's such a difficult issue is because most oil field activity in the exploration and production side, once it's in place, are unmanned activities. I mean, there's not like there's somebody there 24/7, and most ranchers don't want people on their property 24/7. So it's kind of a give and take here. So that creates some difficulty for it too. And you mentioned about pretending to be oilfield workers. I read an article recently about some skimmers at gas pumps, and the guys were there in trucks that were marked from the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they were, and as a former ag commissioner that you ran the regulatory program, I was thinking, I wish I would have been there, and I went up and said, "What are you guys doing here with these pumps?" But fortunately, they got them on tape. They've got those people arrested, and we want a strong law and order in Texas. Right here in the office that we're recording in today, we have an old sign that talked about how this association offered reward for the arrest and conviction of people that were involved in oilfield theft. Fortunately, the legislature stepped up, and let's talk about those bills real quickly. Three of them, House Bill 48, Cory, Chairman Darby and State Senator Kevin Sparks were the leaders on that issue. Tell us what House Bill 48 did.
This one is the one that said DPS is going to have a crime prevention unit for oilfield theft. And so that's what it did. It created a unit within the DPS to coordinate with local law enforcement and give local law enforcement the backup needed to go after these criminals. And so I think this is the one that it's significant, because DPS, we know, has the capability to go after criminals, and this is going to provide the backing that local law enforcement needs to do that.
And you mentioned local, but we have multiple layers, right? We've got cities have theirs. We've got counties that have law enforcement, our sheriffs, constables. We also have federal law enforcement officials, because a lot of this is organized criminal activity on a very high scale. And fortunately, the coordination is what is needed, and DPS does a great job. They've got some real talent. And so bringing that together in a coordinated effort should protect all Texans, because if you've got organized criminal activity in one sector of our economy, it permeates into others. I mean, they're looking for opportunities to do business in ways that could harm the general public. And so I'm real proud of this efforts in House Bill 48. Tulsi, there were other Senate bills that dealt with this as well. One of them was Senate Bill 494, I think it was.
Yes.
Tell us about 494. Who are the legislative champions on that? And tell us the basic framework of 494.
This was by Representative Landgraf and Senator Sparks, where it established a task force to really study what was happening with the theft, because you have multiple layers. You have oil being stolen, you have copper being stolen, pipe being stolen, you have
Trucks
generators, trucks being stolen.
Traders.
And so what is the actual impact of the theft? How much is actually being stolen? There's no central database to know how much we're even talking about here. And so really studying the issue will help law enforcement be able to prosecute these criminals at a higher level.
Well, and you mentioned prosecution. I think that is an underlying theme throughout all of this. Law enforcement has to give the case material to our prosecutors in order for them to effectuate putting people in jail. Absolutely. And getting them off the streets. And so I think having this task force will go a long way to making certain we're identifying the problems correctly. Where are there loopholes? Are there enough resources, or do resources just need to be reallocated into the right direction? Cory, there was another bill, I think, that will also be impactful. It was Senate Bill 1806.
Right.
Tell us about 1806 and what that entails.
Yes, this one was by Senator Sparks again and Dean, former Speaker Craddock, and kind of a multifaceted bill that did a lot of things. It increased the penalties for theft of petroleum products, talking about crude oil. It allowed for, it provided also that if you steal equipment, it's considered theft now. One of the other interesting things it did was went into the Code of Criminal Procedure and said once the criminal justice system has figured out who did something wrong, you can recover that property, for example, if it's stolen property, and bring it back to the victim. Well, the code didn't allow for the proceeds of the sale, and so you take crude and you steal crude, you go and sell it, and you don't have crude anymore, you got money. And so this is going to enable the courts to go and get the proceeds of the sale of that crude and give it back to the rightful owner. It also authorized DPS officers to go in and inspect cargo tanks, and so that's a big thing prior to this session.
And it's big all over the state. I've seen that on our border. I've seen that in some of our refining areas, not only in the production areas. So no matter where you live, this is a problem in your area.
Yeah, that's right. So we're all three of these bills, I think, are really going to up the game on law enforcement of oil field theft and provide a lot of resources at the state and local level to try to get some relief for these communities that are being impacted, as well as for the oil and gas community that's suffering from it.
Well, I appreciate Governor Greg Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, Speaker Dustin Burrows, because as we talked about, there's over 9,300 different pieces of legislation, constitutional amendments or resolutions, and only how many of those actually ended up being signed into law, roughly?
This session was about 15% of the bills.
About 15%.
Which is quite actually lower than typical.
So making these a priority, getting them through that very difficult process of going through both chambers, reconciling the differences, and doing it all in 140 days, which it might seem like it seems like a long time when you're in the middle of the 140 days or the 140 nights, but it's really a relatively short period of time for the hearings, the public hearings that occurs. I mean, you can't pass a bill without having a public hearing on it, and it has to be read on 3 different days, legislative days, during the session. And this is all designed to protect citizens so that things can't be passed without your knowledge and without your information. And that's what we're doing today, is increasing that level of information, making it available to you in this process. Oilfield theft was big, but an area that Dr. Dean Foreman, the economist here at TXOGA, and I have spent a lot of time on is the volume of production of natural gas in Texas. I mean, Texas, if it were its own country, which always sounds good to me, I just like to stop there from time to time, would be I think it's the 3rd largest natural gas producing country in the world. If we were all by ourselves, we're producing, I think, of marketed natural gas in excess of 34 billion cubic feet a day. I think of the latest numbers I've read, that might have bumped up a little bit. We don't use all of that natural gas here. We can't. It's more than we can use, and so it's kind of like ice cream. Eat all you can and sell the rest. That's what we use, all the liquid, the natural gas you can, and sell the rest. We're partners to our neighboring states. We're partnering to Mexico. We're partners to countries around the globe in liquefied natural gas. This is an industry that Texas has been leading on. We're in competition with Louisiana, not only on the football field, but in natural gas production as well. So we've got some work to do, but we've got some great companies in Texas that are taking this natural gas, liquefying it, and shipping out all over the world. And y'all help me with those. I know Cheniere was the first that started here, and they keep expanding. I think I saw something the other day about Cheniere expanding. Freeport LNG has been functioning here in Texas for a while. They're a big participant in this market. You have Golden Pass. That's in your area you grew up in, right, Cory?
Right, right off of Sabine Lake and on the Louisiana-Texas border.
Yep.
Adjacent to Jefferson County. So
yeah,
that one.
Golden Pass. But there's another one.
You go all the way down the coast to Brownsville. You got Rio Grande LNG. That's
next decade. The project Next Decade is in the process of, they're under construction today. They're building that out. Sempra is also building in the Beaumont area as well. So you've got Golden Pass and Sempra there. Cheniere is in Corpus Christi. Freeport is in Freeport. And then Next Decade is down in Brownsville. And there's some others that are mentioned as well. But look, folks, these are billions and billions of dollars of capital, and thousands and thousands and thousands of employees. Going to these sites is just like something you've never seen. I saw more dump trucks on one construction site than I've ever seen in my life, and they were just all moving in tandem. Really, it's an orchestrated effort bringing construction jobs and growth to Texas, and the legislature recognizes their importance and recognizes that they want to make certain you've got a good environment to continue to grow the LNG companies, to give them opportunities to do good things. Now, there's a couple of things that were done, Tulsi, and one of them, I think, was Jared Patterson. I remember Representative Patterson, he held some interim hearings, in fact, on LNG what was the reason he held those hearings?
Well, he really became a champion this legislative interim because in early 2024, the previous administration, federal administration, put a pause on new permits for LNG. They really wanted to, I think the reason was they wanted to study the impact to the American consumer as well as any sort of environmental issues. And what they found, which we already knew here as Texans, was that exporting LNG is good for everyone. It's good for the consumer. It's good for emissions across the world. And we need to continue to do that and provide that for countries who don't have this amazing resource that we have. And so he was chair of the select committee on protecting Texas LNG exports. Sorry, I had to look at my notes. That
is a long title, and they had hearings in the Beaumont area, and they really addressed all these issues and the concerns that were raised about, well, is this going to make gas unavailable in the United States when we need it? And what we discovered at that hearing is that we have more gas than you can use. In fact, gas prices at the Waha hub, which is in West Texas, have been negative prices because there's more gas than you can move through the infrastructure system. And so having outlets globally is a real plus for everyone. Have those jobs here locally in the production side of things and the port side of things and the LNG side of things. And so there was legislation that was passed as a result of the hearings. Tulsi, tell us about it. I think it ended up being Senate Bill House Bill 2890.
Yes. So House Bill 2890 by Representative Patterson and Senator Parker created a interstate compact for the LNG industry for all the states along the Gulf of Mexico. So yes, Louisiana is our competitor, but we need to work together. We're American. We need to work together. We need to be using our infrastructure and our resources to be really maximizing this product. And so this compact will help the states kind of talk to each other, learn best practices, see, if there's anything that needs to be done in one state versus the other, if there's any infrastructure issues, things like that, really allow the states to communicate better.
And it's all designed so that we can be a stronger America, have the energy security that leads to national security. And as we think about what's going on in the globe today, at the federal level, they're worried about Russia. They're worried about China. There are actions that are being taken in order to level the economic playing field. And so if we want to have a strong nation, and if we want to be independent, then we have to have good infrastructure, develop these energy resources, because this is literally powering modern life. And it's got a lot of good benefits that you mentioned, Tulsi, about the environmental benefits associated with liquefied natural gas, just the basic energy security.
And just think about it. A decade or two ago, we were talking about importing natural gas, taking natural gas produced in who knows what country, Russia or in the Middle East, and bringing it here and taking that LNG and putting it into gas form for our uses of chemical production and whatnot. And now we're talking about reversing that process, taking Texas natural gas and shipping it overseas. And I'm really excited about the job opportunities that this provides. Like you mentioned, my home community of Jefferson County, big time jobs, and good paying jobs. And it just shows you the innovation and the continuous outlook that oil and natural gas companies have in providing the next energy molecule to consumers. And when industry does that, it provides national security, energy security, good paying jobs, including in my home area.
And when I was in your home area, Cory, they had so many employees going to these sites that they all had to go park at a remote area and then just go by bus after bus after bus and do that on shift work to get it all in. It's just, there's so many benefits. It's really hard to capture in any short time. There's one more bill I want to talk about. But before we do it, I want to go to a commercial break and hear from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back to wrap up with this last bill on LNG and some important issues about difficult topics like that dirty word taxes. And so stay with us and we'll be right back. Thanks to a partnership between TXOGA and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas, now more than ever, it's easy for small businesses to provide affordable group health coverage for their employees through the TXOGA Healthcare Plan. With a TXOGA plan, members can choose the right healthcare plan and benefits for them priced within their budget with the physicians and providers they trust. TXOGA's healthcare plan is available to small businesses with between 2 and 50 total employees who are headquartered in Texas, members of TXOGA, and aligned to the Texas oil and natural gas industry. If your organization is not enrolled but looking for coverage, visit bcbstx.com/TXOGA. I'll say that again. Visit bcbstx.com/TXOGA to learn more. Visit today. Welcome back. We're glad to be in part 2 of issues affecting the oil and gas industry, specifically from the 89th session of the Texas legislature that ended on June 2nd of this year. And with us are Tulsi Oberbeck and Cory Pomeroy with TXOGA, who know these issues very at a very deep level, and so it's good to have these conversations with you guys today. We're wrapping up on LNG, Cory. There was one other bill that was kind of an important issue and sends the right signal, I think, to companies about why to do business in Texas. Look, this people can do business all over the world today. Their capital can move. We know that in the States, people moving into Texas. And so tell us about Senate Bill 2037, what that bill did and why it was important.
Yep. Senate Bill 2037 was by Senator Sparks and Representative Jared Patterson. And it's an environmental permitting bill. When you're thinking about either constructing or modifying an LNG facility, just like we talked about, we used to, we're thinking about importing stuff. Things change on a dime.
Right.
National, international affairs and commerce change on a dime. So you got to be able to respond quickly. And so what the bill does is allow for a facility operator to pay a fee and request expedited permitting by the TCEQ to get that environmental permit so that they can build, either construct a new facility or modify an existing facility in a fast manner to meet the global needs that LNG has around the world.
And the reason that that's important is because these projects are like $20 billion projects. And so if you're paying interest on $20 billion, I can't even fathom, but I'd like to think about that, how much if I was earning it. That's a ton of money that could be going toward jobs, expanding infrastructure, doing a lot of things. And if you're waiting on a regulatory agency to give you that permit and you're having to pay interest on that sum of money, that's a big disincentive to do business in Texas. And so I'm very thankful for Senator Sparks and Representative Patterson for recognizing that and moving this through the legislative process, because I think it sends the right signal about doing business in Texas. And I kind of want to wrap up part 2 today about doing business in Texas, because oil and gas companies, from small mom and pops to major companies, can take their money and go anywhere, any state, any country. And so there was also an issue dealing with business courts, Cory, that was important to the business community. And what bill number was that on business courts?
It was House Bill 40. It was by Chairman Landgraf in the House and Senator Hughes in the Senate. And, with any dispute,
so this affects more than just oil and gas, but oil and gas is a part of it, right?
Oil and gas is a part. This is talking about Texas, business courts.
Okay.
And so we're talking about commercial disputes. Regardless of the nature of it, any dispute, once you get to the judicial process of it, you want to get finality. You want to get through the litigation.
Why is it important to have a business court? Because I've got courthouses in my home county and everybody does. Why do we need a business court?
Well, because you want finality quickly, and there's a lot of people that live in Texas, and there's a lot of disputes in Texas. And so what was happening was you've got family issues, you've got personal injury issues, you've got non-commercial, heirs,
Land
will,
ownership
estates,
disputes, maybe.
land ownership, and
Water
so-
disputes like we're seeing right now.
Yeah, and so you bog down the courts, and so not anybody's fault sometimes, but litigation would drag out, and so the business community came together and said, let's create, like other states have done, trial courts at courts at the trial level that are solely focused on business courts. And so last session there was a bill that did that. It created 11 geographical districts in Texas for trial business courts. And this session, House Bill 40 by Landgraf and Hughes came in and adjusted it a little bit and really signaled to the business community and to the legal community that business courts are here to stay in Texas. And it changed the amount of controversy that you can get into a court. It changed it from 10 million to 5 million. So lowered the bar, more cases can be filed there, as well as expanded the substantive jurisdiction that those courts can hear. It lets them do intellectual property and some other types of commercial matters. And so,
but it allows them to become an expert in these areas, which should benefit both parties, whether you're the defendant or the plaintiff. Thank you very much. There you go.
There you go.
In the situation, you should like this because you're dealing with knowledgeable judges and knowledgeable courts that will allow this to be on a more rapid basis, I suppose.
And it did do that, and you can see it by the type of the type of judges that have been appointed here.
Mm-hmm.
Some lawyers would say, I don't want to be a judge because I don't want to deal with certain types of cases. These are really, really sophisticated, high-end type of cases between two very
businesses, right?
Businesses.
Right.
We're talking about businesses, business-to-business litigation. And so the judges on these courts, I know a lot of them, legal scholars, very prominent legal practitioners that said, yeah, that's a court that I'd like to serve on as a judge because we're gonna make some progress in business law.
So whether you're a plaintiff or a defendant, you should be really happy the legislature paid attention to this and was able to move this forward and to make the business environment better for Texas. Look, we're headquarters to most of the major companies that are producing oil and gas, not only in Texas, but in America and all over the globe. And so you want to have that good environment for them to be in. Speaking of good environments and something that affects oil and gas, because we pay a lot in taxes, but affects every person. If you're a homeowner or just doing business in Texas as a citizen, buying products, you pay taxes. So taxes are important, Tulsi, to everyone. And the legislature's been focusing on tax relief, I think, the last few years, right? And they did that in a broad sense that helps homeowners, right, this last session.
Yes.
There's going to be constitutional amendment you'll get to vote on in November 4th, and we're going to do an episode on constitutional amendments when it gets closer to early voting, probably in the October timeframe, late September, something like that. We'll tell Ethan, who will make sure we do this. So if you've got any complaints about TXOGA Talks, talk to Ethan, is what I said. Ethan is the guy to complain to. Hopefully the complaints are few, but taxes are important. And Tulsi, Cory mentioned about 10 to 15 years ago, we were planning on importing LNG. It's because of technology and innovation that we have so much gas now. We're not talking about importing and being dependent on other countries that we're exporting. And so there was a bill that addressed the importance, I think, of innovation and technology this last session. And tell us a little bit about that bill.
Absolutely. Like you said, for the oil and gas industry has really advanced because it has invested in new technology and researching new technology. And one way to encourage that was the R&D tax credit program, which already existed, but we needed some refinement. We needed to keep it going.
It was going to expire, I think, too. Yeah,
absolutely.
Right.
So Senate Bill 2206 by Senator Betancourt and Representative Guerin, they extended that program. So it's for research and development to ensure oil and gas industry can continue to be prosperous because, like Cory said, we were at the point of having to import oil and gas. And so making sure that we are investing and that the state recognizes this kind of investment that companies are making. It is not small dollars. It's huge capital that needs to go into research and development for innovation in this area.
And the way that this works, folks, is that this is this is an incentive to conduct that research and development in Texas. And if you do that, you're not going to get a government check handed to you. You're going to get basically a credit against taxes you would have paid. And so we're saying if you'll do business in Texas, you won't pay as much tax if you're doing research and development. And this is important to oil and gas because research and development is why we're getting so much more productivity today. You're seeing a lower rig count than ever before in the history of oil and gas, but you're seeing volumes of more production because of this research and development that's occurred. But this bill is just not for oil and gas, and it's really not for oil and gas. We just happen to be able to be eligible in some instances. Industrial manufacturing, high tech, all the types of things. When I drive back and forth into Austin, I'm amazed at the Samsung facility that is occurring, that is just growing. And we have artificial intelligence and data centers that are being built here in Texas, and research that can occur. And we're competing with other states and other countries for this. And so it sends the right signal if we're saying we're going to not tax you as heavily as we could for a limited time, for you to put those dollars in those jobs right here in the Lone Star State. The legislature saw the advantage of that. I know that Senator Joan Huffman worked closely with Paul Bettencourt on that because it was such a big issue. A lot of people in the legislature were really focused on that. And like you said, Charlie Guerin in the House, Charlie Guerin's from Fort Worth.
Well, and to bring it back to what we started with produced water, we wouldn't be in a place where we are to use produced water for beneficial reuse if there wasn't research and development and innovation and pilot projects. This is what our industry does the best. They come up, there's a problem that needs to be solved, and they come up with a solution. And so this just helps all industries to be able to continue to do that.
That's right. That's a good point. Folks, we've given you a lot of information here in part 2 of the 89th legislative session focused on oil and gas. I want to thank Tulsi Oberbeck, Cory Pomeroy for your insight and for the attention you give to these issues to get them done right. There's a lot of things that I love about the oil and gas industry, but working with our companies who are members of TXOGA, they're here for the long term. Their children are raised here. Their children are getting married and having their own families. And so we want a Texas that benefits everyone. We want to continue to see growth. We appreciate the work the Texas legislature is doing. Stay tuned for more episodes of TXOGA Talk. We'll be watching closely the activities of the special session that Governor Abbott called. As I said before, November 4th is a big date for all Texans because these are constitutional amendment elections that will you get a voice in saying how these issues will be determined. And so stay with us and be a part of TXOGA Talks, where energy meets insight.
The views expressed on this podcast are not intended and should not be construed to be the views of any particular TXOGA member or company. The purpose of this podcast is to engage in candid conversations about energy needs, energy security, and the future of energy.